to check see if Zoom's over. Can I press the
Sure. Yeah, thank you.
Actually, we are. Are you?
Okay.
Yes. Oh, yeah. I'm 30 hours a week.
So as soon as that loads, or I guess I can do it up here.
And then if in doubt, you can use these.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. Hello, everybody. I'm gonna maybe take off my mask so that people can hear me better, but I may put it back on as well. I don't know. Maybe to start, if folks want to, I've got a lot of handouts. And sometimes when I'm in a session and I'm listening to a really long PowerPoint, which is really interesting, but it's also really long, I kind of like to glance down and kind of sort through stuff. So if you folks would like to go ahead and take all the handouts now, you're welcome to do that. And then we can start in like 2 minutes. Yeah.
This is the list, right?
Oh, actually, yeah, the list is taken. Oh, you're gonna fire it. Yeah.
In my pocket, and I'll look at it.
Sure. I just brought a few in case people wanted us. I did bring it up to everybody.
Oh, they're over there.
Did these are?
Uh-huh. We're all here.
You know what?
They're right here.
Right? Yeah, they should.
Right.
Oh, well.
Oh,
Can I ask folks? Well, so we're supposed to do a seed ID activity, and I accidentally put the key over here. So you can put the key back, just because it'll kind of be more fun if you don't have it, okay? So, and then I'll give you the key afterwards. Is it?
All right.
I didn't.
The hair is all.
They go a little deep.
That's all right. I did like biodynamics and stuff, so I understand what you're saying.
And also, the folks organizing the conference could not tell me, they couldn't know how many people were going to be here. So I may run out of some of the handouts, and if I do, I would suggest that you take pictures with your phone of your neighbor's handout, and then you can print it out later. Or my email is on here, and you can let me know which ones are missing, and I can send it to you later if you'd like.
I was like, it's gonna fall. It's gonna fall, but it's still dead. I did not hear you. I voice tweaked that one, but not.
Does anybody know how many people are on the hybrid on the Zoom? Does anybody?
It looks like three.
Okay, so not so many. All right. Can people hear me okay with my mask, or is it better if I take it off? I'm just worried about the folks on Zoom as well. Are people comfortable? I'm not very comfortable with taking off my mask, but I think I might, just so that people can hear me a little better. Okay, let's keep our fingers crossed. I'm from Antioch College, and last weekend we had our reunion, and it was a super spreader. And so I'm a little bit paranoid right now. Folks staying in my house had it. I tested negative all week, but there's quite a few. So, all right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. I hope people had time to have a quick bathroom break. There wasn't much time in between sessions, so welcome. And I guess this is so much fun that I get to just go like this. My name is Beth Bridgeman, and I'm a professor at Antioch College. How many of you are from Ohio? Okay, so Antioch College is about 6 miles away from here. It's pretty close. I teach cooperative education and sustainable agriculture and practice. And I've been teaching seed saving since 2014. And my mentor is Bill McDermott from the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. And in 2.5 weeks, he's coming to Ohio, and through Agraria, through a partnership with Agraria, where you're going to be later tonight, and Antioch College and some other organizations, we're offering a heritage grain school. And some of the seeds over here, we're going to do a seed ID activity in a little while. Some of these are some of the heritage grains that we grew. We had heritage trials at Agraria and at Antioch. And so I'm pretty excited about bringing grain back and creating a local grain chain or grain shed, which is kind of the next thing we need to do. We've kind of got vegetables a little bit covered at this point with farmers markets and things, but grain is really important with calorie crops. So that's just a little information about me. Some of these slides today I based on some of the work of Bill McDermott. So today we're going to talk about decolonizing seed, and really I'll give you some resources at the end too. There's a lot of folks working on decolonization right now, or in addition to rematriation, so getting seeds back. And some of you may be familiar with this work, and some of you may be doing this work already. So I encourage you to share. When we're doing I'm going to go straight through the PowerPoint, but in the second hour, we're going to be doing a lot of hands-on activities. So I encourage you folks to share with each other. So this will be us teaching each other. So really, sometimes I think you all are in the field, but sometimes people don't realize how critical seed is. If we don't have seed sovereignty, we don't have food sovereignty. And seed is, the genetic diversity of seed is really important. And 97% of the diversity in vegetables has been lost since 1900. So this gives us a chance to, when we say seed, we create a living seed bank. You all know about the Svalbard Seed Bank and all these seed banks all over the world, which is great. They're great for catastrophes. But how do we keep that seed fresh? When you put seed in a seed bank, when you pull it out, you're pulling it out at a different point in time, a different point in climate, a different point in the stream, right? So if we keep seed fresh by exchanging it with each other every year, then we are a living seed bank. Seed saving is also a wonderful community building activity. So I mentioned 97% of the vegetable diversity estimated has been lost since 1900. And this is hard to categorize and quantify because we'll talk about it later, but the way that the corporations split off and go back like this, 60 to 75% of the world's commercial seed, and I'm talking about calorie crops, grain crops essentially, but also vegetables, are owned by 3 or 4 agrochemical companies now. And I see you taking a picture, which is wonderful.
Okay,
Totally fine. I'm also happy to send the PowerPoint later if you want to grab my email. I'm happy to do that. Okay, so really the important thing, so this is kind of a lecture, this first part, and I know y'all sat through a lot today, but I feel it's really important to contextualize and sort of understand how we got where we are right now. And then the second part will be the fun part where we do fun activities. So the history of seed saving in the United States. This is really important because I'm going to talk about patenting. Oh, what just happened? Let's see if I click on one, will it go back? No. Okay. So the germplasm today in the United States is a mix of a lot of different things. So it's a mix of settler seed, people that, seed that colonists brought, a lot of seed from the Columbian Exchange, which is, preceded settler colonialism, plants from the enslaved diaspora, and plants from settlers, and then indigenous plants. So, when settlers came, of course, there was incredible seed already here. The genetic diversity was vast, and indigenous peoples stewarded that seed. So some of the indigenous seed is what we have in our seed germplasm today in the United States. Some of the things that are indigenous, that indigenous people stewarded, you can see persimmon, pawpaw, wild rice, ferns, ramps, some squash, corn, beans, peppers, things that you kind of think of when you think of indigenous plants in the United States. So some of the germplasm from enslaved, the diaspora, African diaspora, black-eyed peas, okra, watermelon, coffee, all sorts of things. But so The enslaved diaspora did not only bring these seeds with them, sometimes braided into their hair. You've heard those stories, but they also brought their knowledge with them. And this was critical to the Southeast United States. So settler colonials did not know how to grow the things in that kind of climate. And folks from Africa did know how. So they brought their knowledge with them, which was critical. So some of the things, in addition to some of the things I just mentioned, so cotton, black-eyed peas, sorghum. I'm growing some sorghum this summer for the Heritage Grain School, and it's just so beautiful. There's so many different kinds of heritage sorghum. So these are some of the things that went back and forth from one continent to the other with the Columbian Exchange. Dandelions are not indigenous to this country. Honeybees are not indigenous to the United States, as you probably know. Sugarcane, wheat, bananas, coffee, tea, and yams. So when the colonizers came to the United States, a lot of the seed that they brought with them was with wealthy landowners, plantation owners. And they wanted to see which seeds they brought with them would work well here. And some of them worked and some of them didn't. And sometimes they ran into catastrophes because they almost starved. And they were saved by seed that was here with the indigenous folks. So at this time, many of the landowners, these wealthy landowners, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, they started seed societies. This is a picture of Monticello. And they traded this seed back and forth. And they encouraged folks to plant this seed and to see if it would grow here. And they were also at the same time exploring indigenous seed that was already here, and then again, the seed from the African diaspora. So in 1839, originally the Commissioner of Patents, so originally seed was in the Patent Office, not with the USDA, and he secured funding to collect and distribute agricultural seed. 10 years after it started, the Patent Office had distributed 60,000 packages, and by 1855, they had shipped out over 1 million seed packages, and they shipped these to farmers. They wanted to give these to farmers for free, have them grow them out, see what worked, what didn't. This was colonialism. It was to establish farms. And the seed was free. The successor to this, there were several different acts during the Lincoln administration that were really critical to what ended up happening with farming in the United States. Of course, one huge one was the land grant system. But another one was the establishment of the USDA. And at the time, the purpose of the establishment of USDA was to give away free seed. 30% of their budget was to give away free seed. Think about what the USDA does today. What are some of what's the biggest program of the USDA today? Does anybody know?
They are managed by the company. Usually it's under their law. It's under the law.
SNAP, right. SNAP's the biggest program. So the supplement and the school lunch program, and those are very connected. And so if kiddos are on free and reduced lunch, school districts are required to buy commodities because we produce too much food in the United States. It's not that there's a hunger problem, it's that the food's not getting to the right people that need it. But there's an overproduction of so many things with commodities. And so they need a place to dump all that food, and they require school districts to buy it for this school lunch program. So 15 years after it was established, 1/3 of the budget was devoted to the free seed distribution. And at the same time, there were a lot of seed companies forming. They were not happy that seed was being given away for free. And they formed lobbies, and they started lobbying Congress to try to get rid of this free seed program. So in 1883, officially the American Seed Trade Association was formed. And their primary goal was to stop the free seed program. They didn't succeed until 1924. But in 1924, it was eliminated. So there was a lot of things happening around the turn of the last century. The free seed program was eliminated. People kind of rediscovered Mendel again. And that work is what led to the hybridization of corn. People kind of sort of remembered Mendel's work and started working with it. The other thing that happened at about the same time, which we'll talk about in a second, is copyright laws in the United States changed and how they work at that time. So with hybridization, this is some of the work that was happening at the land grant colleges. There was some built-in protection for those who were, working with that plant breeding, because, there's a lot of work that goes into it, right? So again, the establishment of the land grant colleges. So, and I just mentioned copyright laws and the way that worked changed profoundly in 1923. However, the concept of patent was still there. So it wasn't living things. It was something that was created or invented. So farmers, since the beginning of time, have always shared their seed and grown their own seed. And they could still do that at this time. So this is what a patent means. It's exclusive rights granted by a sovereign state to an investor for a limited period of time in exchange for detailed public disclosure of an invention or solution to a specific problem. It's not, you can't patent something that's living at this time. In 1930, this is the first time that we start to see seed patenting. So the Plant Patent Act, and this had to do with Luther Burbank out in California and all the really interesting stuff that he was doing, but it was all about asexually reproduced plants. And so the very first one, it wasn't the David Austin rose, but it was a rose. And so it was asexual propagation, and it could be patented. But still, seeds are not patented. In 1961, the Universal Protection of Varieties Convention was formed in Geneva. And how many of you know about the UPOV? There's a lot of work being done by seed sovereignty folks to try to stop UPOV, because this is profoundly affecting farmers around the world. And so La Via Campesina is an international peasant organization that's trying to work against, and to save their right to save seed, which is, so they're fighting the work of the UPOV. So when this really starts to change is in 1970, we have the Plant Variety Protection Act. And so PVP, I don't think these seeds have it. Sometimes on the back of the seed packet, you'll see it says PVP. Has anybody ever seen that on a seed packet? So Plant Variety Protection Act means farmers can still save their own seed, but they can't sell that seed to anybody. They can't, there's starts to be some kind of limitation on seeds. You can still, save your own, but you can't give it away. You can't trade it. You can't sell it. So when the Plant Variety Protection Act came in, a lot of seed companies, a lot of bigger seed companies started gobbling up smaller seed companies. And so each one of these slides I'm showing you, patenting is increasing, and our ability to save our own seed is decreasing with each one of these things that are happening here. So in 1988, this case went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court codified the fact that microorganisms are alive. It doesn't matter if that's without legal significance. Anything under the sun, alive or not alive, can be patented. And this really opened up the floodgates. In the 1980s, the other thing that started happening was we started to see a lot of biotechnology really, really taking off. And some folks thought, well, maybe we should think about regulating this. I mean, this has a lot of implications here. But President Reagan was the president at the time, and he was very concerned. He was, a business president, right? And he was very concerned about limiting the power of businesses to some of these new technology corporations. He didn't want to limit that work. And so they decided, well, how are we going to regulate this? And so they came up with a coordinated framework for the regulation of biotechnology. And what they decided was, we have laws on the books that protect food additives right now. We don't need any more laws. Biotechnology, if you're taking a piece of a shark and injecting it into an apple, that's a food additive. We don't need any new laws. The laws on the books are sufficient. So then in 1992, the FDA has a policy statement on genetically engineered plant foods. Here's what they say. Genetically modified crops shall be treated as food additives and subject to existing food additive regulation, as long as they're generally recognized as safe, as determined by the producer. So this is the fox guarding the hen house. So here, just as a recap, 1930, 1970, the Supreme Court, this is the one where genetics are allowed to be patented for the first time. So not just the seeds can be patented, but the traits of seeds can be patented now. And this is really crucial. And this is where these companies started buying up all these kinds of seeds, and all these little seed companies had all this genetic diversity. And then now that, they own, these big companies own that genetic diversity. And, and they do research with it, but a lot of it just got, put on a back burner. And so we lost a lot of our genetic diversity. And then the money that they were doing for plant breeding and research got put into 3 or 4 or 5 kinds of corn or whatever. So this has really big implications, because in 1972, I think there was a blight, and I can't remember the name of the blight, but there were 3 or 4 or 5 kinds of corn being grown in the whole United States, and we were really into monocropping at that point, and it devastated the crops because the 4 or 5 different kinds were all prone to this particular virus. So now we have more. So this really has to do a lot with decolonization and rematriation, because we can't save our own seed now. Indigenous folks can't save their own seed. Peasants around the world can't save their own seed. Some of you have heard of Vandana Shiva and her work in India, and the numerous farmers who have committed suicide in India because they can't save their own seed, and they have to buy their own. They have to buy seed from the companies now, and they buy the seed. Drought comes, they lose their crop. They have no money. They take out loans to buy more seed for the next year because they can't save the seed, and they commit suicide. They go into so much debt they commit suicide. So it's a big problem. So these are some of the genetically engineered crops we have in the United States today. So I talked about how much seed is owned by these few companies, and it's hard to quantify because of the complexity of the structure. So some patents, when one company gobbles up another company, some of those patents remain with the former company. Some of them transfer over here. There's takeovers. There's just a lot of different things that happen. But I'm going to show you a little bit that you can. This is kind of a nice visual. So in 2011, these were the companies. You can see Monsanto. Monsanto is always the one we like to talk about, right? In 2011, they owned 26% of the world's calorie crops, the grains. DuPont had 18%. So this is 2011. Now look at this graph. Now look at the next page. So DuPont goes up to 32% in 1 year. Monsanto now has 30, Syngenta has 10, and then all the other little seed companies in the world are 16%. Okay, 2012. As of 2018, I need to update these slides. Dow and DuPont merged in 2015, and then they divided into 3 companies, including Corteva. ChemChina acquired Syngenta, Bayer acquired Monsanto, and then Bayer's seed divisions were sold to BASF. And now see, these 4 firms control well over 60%. So you can see Bayer, you can see just how these all got gobbled up. So that's a little bit hard to see with that thing there. In 2012, this is again, my statistics are 10 years old and I really need to update these slides, but the commercial seed market, let's say that it was $47 billion. Let's say it was a line that was 8 feet long. The US part of that market was 2 feet long. So we had 1/4 of the seed of the world here. The organic and small company seed sales were 1/5 of an inch of that 8-foot long line. So organic is still very small, and it's critical. So 12 plants supply 75% of the food in the world. 12 plants, most of the genetic diversity of which has been lost, most of which is owned by 3 or 4 companies. You see where this is kind of scary, isn't it? So 3 plants, 50% of the world's food comes from 3 plants: rice, wheat, and corn. So we have this big movement now for seed, a growing movement for seed sovereignty. We need to save and share seed for security. We need to have this seed adapted better. And what I say here, y'all know about horticulture zones, agricultural zones. For those of you in Ohio, in Southwest Ohio here, we used to be 5B, and now we're 6A. Where are you all from? Anybody from outside of Ohio? Do you know what your zone is? What's your zone? You don't know? Okay, anybody know their zone?
Michigan, fine.
Five, just straight 5, okay.
6B, by the lake.
Okay, yeah, right, because it's not just like this, it depends on the,
Yeah.
yeah. Anybody else know their zone?
6A.
Okay. So here's the thing, when you look on a package of seed, we've all bought seeds and it'll say good for zone 6A, right? So Dayton, Ohio is 6A now. I'm from Colorado originally. Denver is 6A. Think about the climate between Denver and Dayton, how different the climate is, how different the soils are. So seeds bred commercially are bred to be good for as wide an audience as possible. And sometimes on a seed packet of seeds, it says all American seeds, and that means, you know, it's 6A. It does sort of well mostly in every 6A, but there's a lot of different 6As. So what we need to be doing is taking seed and regionalizing. We need seed that grows well in Dayton, Ohio, you know, because we have a little microclimate here, just like y'all do. And so we need to be creating land races. Oh. Well. Okay. So I want to talk just a second about seed law. Seed law exists for a reason. And so there's a lot of intrastate seed laws. So if you send bad seeds with viruses or whatever in it across, you know, it's going to affect everywhere. And so you have to be careful with seed. And that's where we have our laws about it. So the American Association of Seed Control Officials, there's one, usually at this Department of Agriculture in every state, there'll be some person who's in charge of the ASCO portion. So what started happening when we started saving seed you're from Pennsylvania, do you remember in 2014, was it? There was seed libraries started forming, and the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture said, wait a minute, that violates the seed law. You can't share seeds at a library. And what was happening was they were taking a hammer to hit a flea. There just weren't the right level of laws that existed at that level. There were only these super big laws. And so they created the Russell Amendment, recommended uniform state seed law. They made an amendment to this. And so now, and it's different for every state, you can have seed libraries in most states because they created this new level of law to say, wait a minute, they're just sharing seed. They're not selling it. They're not, you know, sending it across state lines. They're just sharing it locally. There's really nothing wrong with that. So Ohio, we haven't bought into the Russell Amendment yet, but we follow the Russell Amendment. So we just don't have it codified in the Ohio Revised Code yet. The last I looked, there were 16 states that had actually codified the Russell Amendment so that it's very legal to share seed. In most states, it's, again, they sort of follow it even if they haven't codified it yet. So this is changing, and it's changing for the good. So how do you know if a seed is patented? If you're purchasing seed, it has to say so on the packet. It will say if it's patented or not. A lot of you might be buying seed from organic seed companies and small seed companies. A lot of those are open pollinated seed and they're not patented. So there's this new thing, it's kind of the opposite of patenting seed. It's called the Open Source Seed Initiative. And if you can pay, you know, just a few pennies more when you buy a packet of seed to buy a packet that has this symbol on the packet, you're supporting companies that are vowing that they will never patent seed. They're going to keep it open as long as they can. And that means they have to charge a little bit more for that. And so it's really a nice thing to support the Open Source Seed Initiative companies. And so this is the thing they put on the seed packet. It says that, you know, we're not ever going to patent seed. And if you buy this seed, you agree that you won't ever participate in patenting it either. So the Safe Seed Pledge was formed by High Mowing Organic Seeds, which is up in Vermont. And they have a stance, you know, that they'll it's a kind of a similar thing. We must protect the foundation for the benefit of all farmers. We pledge we do not knowingly sell genetically engineered seeds or plants. Now there's another thing that's happening, the patent-free seed campaign. What's happening now, even with organic companies and these small little companies, is it's this patenting problem with the traits, and some of the traits, even in open pollinated seed, are starting to be patented now. And so they're trying to start another campaign where these little companies will, you know, have another logo and say this is patent-free seed. So people are trying to turn this big ship around. Yeah.
Oh, we have a patenting, then it has to say it's patented. Like I'm thinking of Johnny's because they're kind of big, but still a lot of small stuff grows use them. But I don't think a lot of their descriptions say that it's patented. But maybe I'm looking in the wrong location. I'm just imagining that more of theirs probably are than like a Fedco or a high mowing, but it's still a low number of theirs that are patented.
It's what, well, again, this is information from my seed mentor, Bill McDermott from the Rocky Mountain Seedlines. And what he shared with us was that if it doesn't say patented on the package, it's not patented. So they can get in trouble if they're selling it out saying that it's patented. I mean, if that particular thing is patented,
And
they have to say. Okay, so there's something happening now. You've read about it. I think I gave some handouts, the Bill Gates initiative. And so there, Bill Gates, in his mind is really, trying to work with making enough food for everybody. But what they're doing is he's doing it through these great big huge corporations, again, that are devastating the small farmer. So it's really like the Green Revolution, but it's they're pushing that in Africa now, and it's all about technology and bio engineering. So more than 85% of Africa's seed supply comes from small farmers, tiny little farmers. But what's happening is they're stopping that work and really sort of pushing this biochemical or this bioengineered seeds. So these multinational corporations that own these three that own between 60 and 75%, this is what's happening now. It's getting even more so. So I think a lot of you folks are in the business. You're in the agriculture business, I assume, and so you know kind of a lot about this already. But I teach sometimes to people who just really don't have a clear understanding. A lot of times people say, well, what's wrong with genetic engineering? Why is that different from plant breeding? Well, it's very different from plant breeding. People have been breeding seed forever, crossing seed, but genetically engineered it can be very different. Open pollinated versus hybrid. Does everybody understand about that? So, okay. So just a little thing that some people don't know sometimes about, whoops. Oh dear, okay. I'm not used to this screen.
Take two fingers and shrink it. No, one hand, two hands.
Like this?
That might work.
Someone want to?
I think about this if we do this. Oh. Is it real big? Go on to the next one and see what happens.
Yeah, I can't. It seems to be stuck.
It's not happy. I might have to go to the other one.
Oh boy.
Wow, that's exciting. Here, hold on. This is yours, right?
Mhm. That's like,
Yeah, well, yeah, except we don't know. We'll go down here. You know where you were.
let's see.
Sorry, hold on for a second. Chat amongst yourselves. Been busy.
A lot of slides.
I'll see.
Okay, we're getting that close.
Getting there, we're getting there. Yep. Keep getting here somewhere. No, almost this one.
Okay,
Okay, let's go to this one. Okay. All right, slideshow.
one slide.
No, slideshow. I think it's gonna go to this one. Figure it out.
Okay, here we go.
Oh, we're good.
And then,
Okay. Life is good. Okay.
and then
Resume slideshow. Okay, hit the wrong button. My bad. Try again.
I think you need to X out of the current presentation.
I think so. This one.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Oh, okay.
It was.
I think we have it.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
Okay,
Okay, so a lot of you, I think, already know about this. This is an audience who's done this work before, but to create a hybrid seed, you take a homozygous parent from two homozygous parents. So you have seed from this parent and seed from this parent. You have a trait here, you have a trait here, and you cross them, and then you have an F1. So it's an F1 hybrid. It's a first generation hybrid. And you create, you're taking the trait from two, maybe you have a large orange tomato and you have a narrow red tomato, and you want to cross those to get a narrow orange tomato, for example.
keep going.
So something that people think is that you can't save hybrid seed, that it won't be true. And it won't necessarily be true, but it might be true to type. So what you do is you stabilize the 7 or 8 generations, then it becomes open pollinated again. Do you see what I'm saying? So you keep selecting out, and then it becomes stable enough that it can be considered open pollinated, and so it will come back stable every year. So open pollinated is regionally adapted and it's stable. So you can see all the genetic diversity in there, right? Whereas a hybrid is one size fits all. It's kind of like the All-American sign that you see on seeds packages. So let's talk a little bit about germination rate. We're going to do an activity later. So no seeds have 100% germination rate. This is important when you think about interstate seed law. Seed companies are allowed to sell the minimum germination rate. And so different types of plants have different germination rates. Typically peppers have about a 55% germination rate. So, I mean, it can vary widely, but just sort of as a, what do you call it? Average, thank you. I'm a little scattered today. A seed company can sell a packet of seeds that 55% of those are viable. Good seed companies will sell 100% viability. And so you pay more for that. So if you get, if you go to Dollar General and you get 2 packets of seeds for $1, that germination rate, they may not have been stored properly, or they may have used that minimum germination rate, right? But if you get fresh seed from a really reliable company, that's going to be 100%. So that's why it's important to, when you're saving your own seed from year to year, to do a germination test before you plant it. And now we need to know, I'm going to zip through this fairly quickly so we can get to the fun stuff. But if you're going to save seed, you need to know how the seed is pollinated. Because if it's wind pollinated, it can cross. Some seeds are self-pollinated, or some plants. So we'll just go through this pretty quickly. If a plant has a perfect flower, some of those are selfers and some of those are crossers, but some plants that are selfers, some examples are tomatoes, peppers, peas, beans, and lettuce. So they have the male and the female within the flower, and they self-pollinate. And so mostly, if you're starting to save seeds, self-pollinated seeds are the best ones to start with, because you don't have to worry too much about cross-pollination. Now, tomatoes are a good example. Bumblebees, I love this story. There's a great TED Talk. Marla Stood, I guess her name. So tomatoes are self-pollinating, but it's very sticky, and so they kind of need to be bumped a little bit so that the pollen falls off and gets where it needs to go. Bumblebees can go in there and pollinate, but it's kind of hard for them to get into a perfect flower. But what bumblebees do is they're attracted to tomatoes, and they go up to tomatoes and they're sonicating, right? And so that vibration causes the pollination to happen. Isn't that lovely? So there are some perfect flowers that are crossers, and some example of those are broccoli, cabbage, and so the brassicas. And so some flowers some plants have imperfect flowers, and so there's only male parts or female parts. And some of these are corn, squash, spinach. Again, some of those, we'll go into this in a second, but monoecious and dioecious. So this gets a little bit complicated, but some crossers are corn, squash, spinach, melons, cucumbers, and watermelons. So selfers are perfect flowers. Here's some that are perfect flowers, self-pollinating. Crossers are either perfect or imperfect, and the cross-pollinating happens between plants. So here's some example of a crossers with perfect flowers, but they're self-incompatible. So the brassicas, even though they're perfect flowers, they need another one to pollinate. Oh my God. Did I just go back to the very beginning? I'm so sorry. Can someone help me? Really
If
sorry.
you like zoom out more, then we'll go back to your full, yeah.
Okay. We, at Antioch College, we have like 100 students. We're a micro college and we're really into research and we don't have these smart screens, so.
What did we do this time?
I don't know what I did. I'm just trying to, let's see.
Where were you at?
Okay, here we are. Okay, let's just go this way.
Okay.
Okay, there.
And you're still, she's still in the system.
We're tracking you guys outside.
So the pollinators are pollination methods, self-pollination, wind, insect pollination, or a combination. So I love this picture. Isn't that beautiful? So here's an example. I have a list here. I gave you all a list here. If you're starting to save seed, you can just kind of look and see. So amaranth, for example, is wind pollinated. And to get a stable population, you would need at least 10 plants. And since it's wind pollinated, if you were doing isolation, they need to be like 2 miles apart, or they could cross by wind pollination if you had 2 different kinds of amaranth. Beets are wind pollinated. And typically the tinier the seed, the more likely it is to be wind pollinated, just as a rough rule. So this is just kind of a nice thing that you can see. Now, this is important to know, but there's also ways to protect pollination. Even if they're wind pollinated, you can still plant them closely together if you use some of these techniques I'm going to show you about. Okay, so the first thing to do is know your families and know what can cross and what can't. So species can't cross, but varieties within species can. So for example, beets and chard can actually cross. They're in the same species, but beets and quinoa can't. They're in the same family, but not the same species. Another example, acorn squash and zucchini can cross. They're in the same species, but squash and cucumbers can't. They're the same family, but not the same species. So, and I'll just go through the different families, the crop families. The goosefoot family is beets and chard, mustard, parsley family, carrots, parsnips, nightshades. We all know about our nightshades. And this includes tobacco, which is interesting, that's why you get your tobacco mosaic virus on your tomatoes. And then the gourd family, composites are kind of a lot of things that just they put in one thing that they didn't really fit anywhere. And then the lily family are your onions and things. And then the grass family is your corn, and then mallow is okra. Okay, one thing you can do is decide whether you need to obsess about whether they cross or not. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe you want to create the crosses, right? So it depends on how you're saving seed and what your intention is. Maybe you're wanting to save a very particular variety and make sure it's, it doesn't get crossed with anything. And there are techniques we can use for that. Okay, so really quickly, you can isolate by space. Make it far enough apart, like 2 miles apart if it's going to cross. That's kind of hard if you have a neighbor who's growing a different kind of beet than you are, right? You can isolate by timing, and they do this a lot with corn. And something happened out at Agraria, where you're going to go later tonight for dinner. It's surrounded by traditional corn farmers, but they have small farmers who are doing organic corn. And so Jason Ward is our farmer out there. He comes from a traditional farm family, and he knew exactly what to do. And so he was planting his, he was doing it by timing so that the pollen wouldn't cross. So he waited until after the other farmers had planted. He waited 2 weeks till he planted his, but then the other farmers' corn got rained out and they replanted. And so it ruined his whole crop. It got contaminated. Sorry, we'll put that back up in a minute, and then that'll be one of our activities. Okay, so then you can isolate by cages, and they have a lot of pollination cages out at the Seed Savers Exchange in Decorah, Iowa. If you ever get a chance to go out there, it's a magical place. And since COVID, they've had their conferences online, but a really fun thing is to go the 3rd week in July to the conference, and you meet seedy friends from all over the world. And it's really fun, and you get to see their beautiful fields. And this is how they do it, is with pollination caging. And so you can do alternate day caging. So if you have 2 things nearby, you can take the one thing that you don't want to cross and do cage all of them, and then the next day cage the other one, so that they can pollinate with each other but not cross. This is protection hoops, you can put it across the whole thing, but then you have to put bees inside so that they can pollinate. Blossom bags. So this is, you can get these from Bedco, and this would go over like a pepper plant, or not, pepper's not a good example because that's self-pollinating, but these go over plants. You can put them over the whole plant. These are blossom bags, and you just put them over the flower itself, and then you pull it down, and that prevents, this is prevents against insect pollination. And you can get those online too. I kind of use Amazon more than I should, and you can get dozens of those bags for really, really cheaply. But you know, try to support Bedco and the other places if you can. You can hand pollinate, and that's another way to prevent cross pollination. That's a really fun activity to do with kids. I should have brought some in today because it's something else we could have done. So you can see it's really easy, particularly on squash and cucumbers, to tell the female and the male flower. So this is the female, and there's the ovum, and the male is just a stem. And so, you know, before I started getting into this, when I just, you know, years ago, I would say, oh, look, there's 30 blossoms on my squash. I'm going to have so many squash. And then I get 3 squash. And that was because most of those flowers were male. And the male flowers come on first, typically, with squash. And so when you see those female plants, it's a really great idea to go ahead and hand pollinate and grab some of that pollen and go ahead and hand pollinate, and then close that off if you're saving seed, so that you'll make sure and get pollination and without crossing. So this is how you do it. You can also just use a Q-tip, and then you close it off with some masking tape or something to make sure that, you know, it doesn't cross pollinate with other insects coming in. And then how will you remember that though? So you can do it this way too. You want to put a little ribbon on the stem so that you'll know in the fall that that's the one that that didn't get contaminated. Okay. So how do you know which seed to save? Probably a lot of us want to save all the seeds, but it's not necessarily a good idea because you want to save for health. So, okay, I'm kind of zipping through this so we can get to the fun stuff. So here's what happens. I always, you know, when I start my seed in February or March, some of it comes up and some of it doesn't. And I want to just save every single plant that comes up. But if you're trying to save seed for the following year, a great thing to do is to take some of these that are not quite as healthy, you know, they're smaller, and go ahead and pull those out right at the beginning. And that just kills you to do that. But if you're saving for seed, it's a great thing to do because you're only having really healthy plants right from the start. So you can look in the field and just kind of look at, you know, which plants are best. A harvest, you can select at harvest time. Or afterwards, you can look at, you know, if you're going to say, maybe you don't want to save all the seed from a particular cob, you want to actually literally find, you know, the plumpest kernels. And natural selection of, you know what, this is generic, right? Because this could have been a gully here, and that's what, you know, there's a lot of different reasons this can happen, but just generally speaking, just try to look for the healthiest plant. Okay, and then maybe that's exactly what you want to do, is cross as many things as you can, and that's how we create new varieties and things. And so this is called painted mountain corn. Dave Christensen created this, I think, in the 70s, and he crossed 71 different strains of corn and stabilized it out. And so there's a ton of variety, right, within a corn. And so the other word for landrace is called grex, and it means flock. And so this is a 3-root grex created by Alan Kapuler. By crossing, he crossed yellow intermediate, Crosby, purple Egyptian, and Lutz salad leaf. And so when he plants out this seed, this is what he gets. And so this is beautiful. It's not what we're used to, but it's beautiful because in a particular year, you know, if something doesn't, if a virus affects something in one of these, it's not going to affect, you know, there's so much variety here that it helps us to stabilize our food. So then that's really fun to make intentional crosses if you kind of get into breeding. So this was a sweet Dakota rose that crossed black diamond in early Canada, got the sweet Dakota rose. So diversity is resilience. And so that's what we really need to be thinking about now. Another reason I'm excited about Heritage Grain School. So my cousins are Kansas wheat farmers. And this year they got about 1/3 of their yield. They planted, you know, you plant wheat in the fall. They planted in the fall, and then it never rained, ever. It never rained, ever. no snow, no rain. And they weren't even going to harvest. And they ended up getting a little bit of rain in April, and they went ahead and had a little bit of a harvest. In Southwest Kansas, they didn't even harvest. There was nothing to harvest. And so we need to get that resilience. We need to be bringing in seed that is drought resistant. And so another tragedy that happened a few years ago, the native seed search in Southwest, they're based in Arizona in the Southwest. They work with dryland seeds. They work with seeds that are, I mean, you can grow corn on 4 inches of rain a year. And so that is really important. I mean, we're losing our water all over the world. The Syrian seed bank, it had a lot of the dryland seed in the world saved in their seed bank. And Aleppo was attacked a few years ago, and we lost some of that, but folks risked their lives in disguised UN white vans, and they got in there as it was being bombed and captured as much of that seed as they could and put them in those vans and drove them across the border to Jordan and then up to the Svalbard Seed Bank. The Svalbard Seed Bank itself last summer flooded because the Arctic Circle is getting warmer much faster than we are. And the seed was not damaged, but the water just, I'll show you pictures, flowed into there, and they were able to save it, but who knows what's going to happen next. So that's another reason that it's important for us to be living seed banks and not just have these seed banks where we hope that everything will be okay. Another great story, Vavilov, Nicholas Vavilov, he was a botanist who traveled all over the world and had amazing seed, and it was in the seed bank in St. Petersburg. And in World War II, as the Germans had, the story, the Germans had surrounded the city, and it was a large city, and the Russians were starving. They were eating the cats, the alley cats, I mean, they were starving, and they needed to protect this incredibly important seed. And so the scientists locked themselves in the seed bank, because also, the Russians themselves would have stormed it, right, to get the grain to eat, let alone, the Germans. And so they locked themselves in a seed bank, and they themselves starved to death saving the seed. I mean, it's an incredible story. Okay, so I hope that all of you will be interested in maybe learning more about saving seed and working towards seed sovereignty for ourselves, and then to take that the next step to seed rematriation, getting seed back to the people from whom we stole it. So these are a few general resources. Richmond Grows Seed is out of Richmond, California, and they kind of wrote the book on seed libraries. They have so many wonderful resources if you're interested in starting a seed library. This is a great video about organic seed. And so the other thing is, if you want to grow organic vegetables, it's great to start with organic seed. And the thing about organic seed, the Organic Seed Alliance, they don't baby their seeds. They grow them in harsh conditions and then they're selecting out for that. And so if you start with organic seed, you're going to be more successful than if you take other seed that's really been babied at the companies and then try to grow it organically, because organically it's harder to grow without pesticides. Okay, this is a great website, and then a couple of great movies, and these are just on Amazon now. The Seed, The Untold Story, and Open Sesame, The Story of Seeds. Really, really inspiring work that people are doing. And Major Seed Save, Bill McNorman's in that movie, and a lot of the other ones. Hudson Valley Seed Shed and Native American Seed Sanctuary. Those are folks working on rematriation. This hasn't happened for 2 years, but the National Heirloom Expo was started by, what's his name, Gerald Baker Creek Seeds, which is itself under controversy right now. But the Heirloom Expo is in Santa Rosa, and it's so much fun. If you ever get a chance to go, it's the second week in September. Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance, Native Seed Search I mentioned, and then Seed Savers Exchange. So these are good websites to look at for decolonization. Dryland Farming, Sierra Seeds is run by Rowan White, a Mohawk seed keeper. Restoration Seeds, these are places to get some of this indigenous seed and to grow it out and then to give it back to folks. So on the Antioch farm over at Antioch College, we have two projects. One is Seed from Threatened Communities. And so Dayton, Ohio is a welcome friendly city. So we have a lot of immigrants from a lot of different places. And food is culture, right? And so when you're displaced and you come to a new place and you don't have access to your own food, it's really hard. And so we're growing out some of that food. We have stuff from Syria, Sudan, Honduras, and we're growing it out, and then we're going to share it with those displaced communities. And then we have a rematriation project going as well. Okay, True Love Seeds out of Philly. They have a great African diaspora collection. And then here's three, there's a lot of great seed books, but these are 3 books. This is How to Start Seed. And then this book is really lovely. Virginia Nazaré is an anthropologist at the University of Georgia. She's a Filipina who did a lot of her work in the Philippines, and she just writes beautifully about the stories behind seed. So it's really that somatic connection. And so what I like to say to my students is we all already are seed savers. We're just 1 or 2 generations away, but it's, you know, some of that is somatic. It's in our DNA to know how to save seed. And so when we can reconnect with the ancestors, it's just a really beautiful thing. And so that's part of the rematriation process as well. I think. Okay, so now we're going to do our things. Does anybody want a break, or should we just get up and start doing the things so you guys can, okay.
And if you want a break there might still be snacks outside, granola bars, cookies, fruit, water, maybe some coffee.
If I could,
You're going fast.
the Alliance of Native Seed Keepers, Beth and Dix out of Virginia, I talked to last time, are really good folks doing the same thing too. So they're Alliance of Native Seed Keepers.
Did you get that to them? That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah, and
Yeah,
other
they've been
folks have
honored
resources.
campus, and they do wonderful things about the seeds, and then also offering native indigenous myth is connected with that seed.
The
What's the
story.
name of that organization?
Alliance of Native Seed Keepers. There's a couple Facebook videos, but they.
We can just leave-
You can answer the question. Yeah, we can leave it up. I was just thinking if I could get him taken. We're good, we're good.
Okay.
No problem.
We'll wait just a second for folks to come back, and then the first thing I'd like for people to do, and this is just kind of a fun thing if you're at the beginning of a seed class, is just to have all of, well, let's just do this now. Have you folks, or people are going, okay, yeah, want to take a little bit of break? I'm gonna do this in just a couple minutes.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you covered this or not, but what's up with the expiration dates that are on seed packets?
That's a good question. So did everybody hear the question about expiration dates on seed
I haven't
packets?
noticed expiration date. Who's publishing it?
Yeah, they are.
So,
There
so,
are.
yeah, a lot of seed, there's, I mean, reputable companies are, actually,
They
Seed
put
Savers
last
changed
year.
their either, but
Johnny's puts when it was last tested, the germ percent was tested. Not the germ, not an expiration.
I actually am seeing it less and less, but there's often an expiration date on the seeds that say don't use it after this date. So if the seed has been stored properly, tomatoes, for example, can be good up to 10 years. You've heard the stories about, 2,000-year-old seeds coming out of clay pots and, so it's really important to store it properly. And I just used to just keep it, on my sideboard, which is okay, but it's better to have seed saved in a cool environment. And so the thing to do is to take your seed, put it in, I'm gonna pass some of these out. I like to use these for my seed packages. They're just coin things that you get from Office Max.
Yeah.
And so save your seed in here, and that's important. We're gonna show you how to label it, and then put that inside a glass jar. Because if you just put it in here and put it in your fridge, or even in here inside of a baggie, it's gonna dry it out too much. And so put it in here, put it inside a glass jar, and just keep it in your refrigerator. And that'll keep that seed fresh, and your germination rate will be higher. Just because, and that's why we're going to do a germination test. That's why it's really important to do a germination test before you start your seeds, because you might have a really low germination rate. That doesn't mean you can't use it. It just means, hey, you need to either plant it more thickly, right? If it's a 20% germination rate, you need to plant it 5 times more thickly to make sure that you're going to get what you need. Okay, let's actually go ahead. And there are 6 different signs here. Have a look at the signs, and if you could just go stand underneath the sign that most accurately describes yourself.
Looking at the sign, it's standing.
What's the camera? What we're trying to do is seed prime. Seed prime, yeah, to get the old seed germinating. Yeah, we're using high energy and high temperature. Depopulates the seed prime. And as everything is through
No, like. Right, I know, that's how I.
Yeah.
feel. I'm like, I'm not an expert.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's a perfect, they will, so if they're super, they dry them back down.
Yeah, that's how this is.
We can see
Okay, so here are our signs. This sign here says experienced gardening. So these are the folks who feel like they are pretty experienced gardeners. This one is experienced seed saving. So you're sort of saved seed already. Yay, good. Experienced teaching seed saving. Experience with seed exchanges. So seed libraries or
seed swaps.
seed swaps. Oh, yay. Okay.
Well, at the group in Mexico, that where they brought all the seeds and we started to share seeds.
Great. And then experience with seed libraries.
We ordered some from Grant that USDA seed library.
Yeah, and that's out in Fort Collins, right?
Yeah, some there, some in Davis for grant.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, and experience with seed companies? Nobody, that's usually nobody.
I visited some and talked with them about it, but I mean.
Okay, great. Well, this is just kind of a fun activity, you know, to just get people up and moving when you're starting a seed class. So you can sit back down now, or we can just keep moving. Let me show you something I like to do if I'm teaching. So in this fall, I'm teaching, you know, either the whole quarter, run the quarter system, and we always make our own seed screens. And you can buy seed screens from Fedco, and it used to be you could buy seed screens in any hardware store. And Fedco has 3 different screens that fit inside a thing. Each one of them's a different size, and then you can put them on top of each other, so you get like 9 or 10 different sizes. And it's just great to, you know, do this. It's also a great drying screen. And so I gave you instructions for you and your students if you want to make your own seed screens. Germination testing. Let's do the seed ID activity first. So hopefully you all didn't really keep your thing, and I'll give it to you afterwards. And it's really hard, but all of you are going to be able to understand some of these. So there's numbers on here, and if you want to bring a pencil and paper over and look at the numbers on the sides, and then try to identify what's inside and write it down and see how many of them you can get.
Do you have a list that we're working from? Or do you have to-
Well, I'm going to give you the list afterwards.
Okay, all of our knowledge.
Okay.
Yes, here we go. How many does it go up to?
It's like there's 30 or something. It's a little bit tight, but hopefully you can. Yeah, can you move it over a little bit? Sure. Oh, Tim.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the group's on the farm now.
He was in my early class this
He
spring.
told me. Yeah. They said there's a. Well, his part, as far as our, that's a farm educator.
Oh, hi, nice to meet you.
Yeah, that's so great. We're doing that. It was Ashy.
Ashy, yeah.
Yeah. 3 years ago. Spokane.
So really.
Let's try to get together. I'd love
Absolutely.
to come out and see your place. And we're doing some really fun things together too. So. I'd love to come visit. I'm a little bit busy, but are you there later? Are you there in the summer? Or
Yeah, I'm teaching next week. And then
Okay.
I'll be around later, so I'll probably take the first few weeks.
Let's just email. I still got your email.
Yeah.
And we can maybe figure it out because I'm going away too. And I got it after the screen's going to take a break too. Thanks.
Oh, you're just writing down what kind of seed it is.
Could you, please, yes,
Yeah.
and send me the email. You've got my email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can run the charts.
Yeah, that's good, because I need to update my materials, and I know that's really, oh, that's great. Thank you. Nice to connect. I think there's one that's really obvious, and I think it doesn't have a number on it. You can just go ahead and just put.
Oh, you found it.
Oh, you found it, okay.
Yeah.
There we can go and see if we can identify seeds.
It's a little crowded, but feel free to come on in and. It's a little hard to set these up in this, I didn't know what the room was gonna be set up like, so.
You live in such a area.
Yeah, excited. But which?
You have a
There you go.
Would you like to join in? Or you just-
Yeah, that's pretty good.
I'm getting out of close, people way, I'm looking and
Okay.
trying to figure out myself.
This activity is easier to do at the end of the season. I was a little bit challenged to find seed that was ripe right now, and so there's more native stuff and more wildflower stuff than normally would be in there. Usually it's a little bit easier, is what I'm saying.
Like normally you would have peppers and things.
Yeah, you know, it'd just be more obvious.
Right.
So you collected these in the surrounding area?
Just here, yeah, just over the last week or so. And it was kind of fun because at first I thought, oh my gosh, how can I even do this activity? But there's a lot of stuff that's out there already.
Yeah.
I think there's no problem. There's actually gonna be It's almost over. Where are you from? Yeah, yeah, ours is.
So kind of, we're doing our own thing, but it's nice to come together.
One of those is a little bit moldy, but
I agree.
Do you work with folks at other universities very much?
yeah.
At any philanthropy?
Oh, yeah, I was an extension agent at Ohio State for 12 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
it's
worked
just a
for
matter of.
University of Texas. So, yeah, if anyone ever wants to do that, you know, I like collaborating with folks,
Yeah.
trading stuff.
We don't necessarily that I know of. I don't say.
Yeah.
Like I'm in Italy right now. But you guys like Michael Matthews.
Yeah, actually, I'm on, I'm on the
Oh, yeah. I work with Ohio State Master Gardeners a lot.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so that's like a real natural connection.
Yeah.
It's all gonna be good. Yeah.
So how many people kind of did a few and then kind of gave up?
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and hand out the key now, if you'd like to see what you were looking at. Would you like to hand these out to everyone?
Yeah.
And some of these, when you see what it was, you'll go, oh yeah, that's what that is.
I'm
It'll look more familiar.
yes, I think, you know, and yeah.
Great. Ah, see, that's another way I would put that, is not remember at all.
It's just
Yeah.
but it's like it actually really does send people into, you know, but I think coming in, especially if you're going into
What is number one?
agriculture,
Number one.
thinking
Yeah.
creative oriented
Number one.
community.
Number one is calendula, and it looks like a little seahorse. It's really fun to see.
Mhm.
Let me skip that four in the one I see.
Yeah. It would be interesting to something like specific in the arts.
We save a lot of heirloom beans. We do beans, corn, and squash with our indigenous project. And so some of these beans are some of the beans, the heirloom beans that we save at Cherokee. And some of these are unusual, but I just put them in there because they're so beautiful. I mean, just, oh gosh. There's a Facebook page I should share with you. And it just shows the variety of different things. I mean, you just cry when you see it. It's so beautiful. Incredible variety.
How old are your soils?
That was from last year as well.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing, like, as I said, I'm trying to find
So
spreadsheet.
you closed them out.
Yeah, from last year. Yeah,
Oh,
I wouldn't.
Oh, yeah.
I was too.
I was gonna see if I could get, like, what the students should chew on one.
Oh, we could try. I don't know.
I really.
I don't love the feeling. I'm a little like, I get weirded out by it. Hey, Lauren, you know where you experience that? You just pinch it out off the last part.
It's not as strong as it would be if it's fresh, but there's still a little bit there.
Oh, is that kind of like one forward? Okay.
Yeah, it's still there.
Yeah.
The number of these,
It has.
Yeah.
It
It like makes it like.
And then.
Oh.
Like brand.
What is it called, wow?
Oh,
oh, it's
like a little.
Professors who come together, when I need to talk to come together and kind of brainstorm some ideas, give us science.
okay, why don't we go ahead and take a seat again, and we'll just go over these real quick, and then we can do our next activity.
Yeah.
Awesome. Really. Yeah, the scenes, something like that.
Yeah.
I just grabbed these from the market. I don't even know if they're organic or what. I just. They're the activity here, so.
So.
Yeah. Good soul.
Oh,
I'll just talk about a couple of these. This is a rye that we grew in our heritage grain trials, and it's just beautiful.
yes.
So this is a heritage rye.
What number was that?
This is number 16. And let me show I'll show you a couple of the other ones. So this black, number 2. How many people got that was a bean?
I wrote B.
So this is a heritage bean. It's called Cherokee Trail of Tears. And there's a Cherokee farmer in Oklahoma who provided this seed. And so it was brought across, on the Trail of Tears. Again, food and culture. And so people brought this with them as they were forced to Oklahoma. And there was another heritage one I wanted to show you here. Oh, this one is so beautiful. Number 3 is also a bean. Everybody got that was a bean. This is Hidatsa Shield, and it's from the Mandan tribe in North Dakota. The bean varieties are just so beautiful. So we grow this out as well. Seed Savers Exchange has about 10 different native beans that you can get from their catalog. Did anybody get this one? Number 18? Jack in the Pulpit? How about this one? This is on the roadsides. Mullen, right? Well, and I teach herbalism, and I'm really interested in plant sentience and sort of the spirit in plants. And in March of 2020, so mullein is really great for the lungs. And in March that year, I saw more mullein than I'd ever seen anywhere. To me, it was kind of like the plants were saying, we're here to help. So, does anybody know what this is? It kind of looks like a dinosaur, like very ancient. This is the magnolia. And magnolias were here with the dinosaurs. So some plants have come all the way through that time. And so magnolias are one of our oldest plants. This one is pretty obvious. Anybody? Sumac. Yeah, and you can make sumac lemonade out of it. It's really good.
Actually, right now is the time to harvest
They're out there.
Yeah, is it type of permanent?
No, it's not, no, it looks like it a little bit, doesn't it? So this is, from the staghorn sumac tree, and it's kind of native
This is another, one of those things that more creative.
What's wrong with that?
I don't feel too
Oh, yeah, you took off.
Civil discrimination.
I don't know.
Yes.
Oh, there we go. It's like a miracle.
You're welcome.
I was gonna ask, do you do much like vegetative stuff?
Thank you if you're online.
My thing is kind of sheep baby. I want to learn more about the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never really done that.
I haven't either. I find it's one of those skill sets that